Dynamics 365 Business Central, both online, the cloud, and on-prem, so you can cut across. Am I on? Am I audible? Irene, am I audible? So this will involve many things. One, just to give you an overview of it. We're going to see how to debug. It is going to involve setting breaking points or breakpoints, stepping through the code using step in and step out functionalities, and also debugging the base. But we have also already, most of us have been debugging, and so most of things will be familiar to us. So we shall also see attaching configurations, where you attach a debug to an existing session. Yeah, and also we shall see snapshots, where you debug in the production. Okay, so debugging in Business Central, we know that we debug only when we have maybe bugs or errors in the system. Maybe you have Business Central, there's some error that you've got and you want to debug, find out what is the cause in your code and want to resolve. So that's when you go on to debug. And start the debugging, that F5 key that you can use. So this is just a shortcut, but you can also run, then you go to run, then click publish with debugging. That's ready to. However, to debug the code, there is a feature, an attribute called show my code. This that you see here, that you need to set in the app.json. When it is set to, it must be set to true if you are to debug in any extension. However, if it is false, you cannot debug that particular extension. However, there are some limitations, as I've listed here, that external code so these limitations are when you have your extension, but there is also another extension, maybe the base. The base is like an external extension that you want to tap in when you're debugging. So or another custom extension that someone else might have created. This show my code must be set to true. Then the debugger launches a new client each time you press the F5. Meaning, if I loaded the debugger and in the client, there is a client that is open. Then I load another debugger. Maybe I've made changes and then I load the debug again. So it will load a new extension for the current changes. However, if you have the other one already open in the cloud, it will be capturing the previous debugger. So it is advisable to always close the current client, web client, such that it opens up a new one for the new session. So it will have a new session ID. So you always, but that's what we always do. So say that pausing a debug or a debugging session is not supported in this case. So we have breakpoints when you are going to debug. We have the concept called breakpoints. And this is a mark that you set on a statement or a line in the code. So maybe you got an error somewhere in the distribution, and now you want to, when the code runs, or when you start running the debugger, or when the code is running, it should stop at some point where you want to see what happened before that. So there is a breakpoint that you set. Maybe we shall see later. Let's see. So this is set for the code or the debug to stop when you start running it. And at that point, when you set it, it will run. And you can set as many breakpoints as you want when doing the debugger. However, also set the breakpoint in an external code of this application. You can follow these steps where you set a variable. You can set maybe a variable record, always so stable, especially for the base extension or objects. Then you right click, then move to the base. These .dl files, those are the base extension, the base objects. So you go there and then select the line where you want to put the breakpoint, and you can add it there. Some of the shortcuts that can be used for debugging when debugging. F5, say for start debugging. Control plus F5, that one we know, it is publishing without the debugger. Then Shift plus F5 stops the debugger or the debugging session. Then Control plus Shift plus S5, that one starts the debugger without publishing. However, they say that the debugger will debug the last published version, not the version that is active in your Visual Studio environment. So you published sometime, then after you make changes to your extension, then when you use the Control Shift plus F5 to start the debug without publishing, it will now be debugging the previous code that you wrote, not the excluding the changes that you've added now, until you publish this code again and then run this. That's when the your changes will be considered. Then Alt plus F5, that one starts the rapid application development, or the RAD with debugging. That one we shall see in future. However, this one captures the changes that you that it captures only new changes. That allows you to capture only the new changes that you've added. It is like when you backups, there this kind of there's a full backup, and then that other backup is called differential backup. I think it only captures the new changes in the database. So it is like the rapid application development also captures only the changes. Then F10, that one is to step over, and then F11 step into the code also. Like maybe there is a function extension, and it is maybe in another extension, so it will be stepping into that function. Then F11 step out the code. Then F12 go to definition. Normally we don't use the F12, we just right click on the maybe function when you want to go there, and you say go to definition. So what is familiar with us probably is go to definition. Yeah. Then we have concept of break on errors. So in launch configuration file, you can specify if the debugger should break on the next error by using the break on error property. And if this is set, if the debug is set to break on error, then it stops running on errors that are handled in the code. So there are some errors that we handle in the code. Maybe you're trying to prevent a given error from occurring in your code. So whatever this is, this debugger will stop if you've set the break on error property to true. So when you're running the debugger, it will stop every time it finds that error handled. But it also does on unhandled errors. Even those that you've not handled, it also stops. So the break on error, the default value for this break on error is true, actually. So meaning the debugger stops on implementation that throws an error by default. By default, even if you set it or not, by default it is true. So it will be stopping. And to skip the error handling process, you have to go to the launch.json and set this break on error to false. So default is true. So break on error has a given number of values. If you go to set it in the launch.json, one has true, which breaks on all errors. Whenever it finds any error, it breaks. Then false, that one doesn't break on any errors. So if you set it false, it doesn't break. If it finds any errors in your code, like say the errors that you handle in your code. Then none does the same work as false. It doesn't break on any errors. And all breaks on all errors. Then there is also, it also has the exclude try. That one breaks on errors only if they occur outside of the context of the try function. Try. So outside of your error handling. So that's where it breaks if there is anything outside of your error handling. So, however, they tell us that the values, this true, you've seen that true is similar to all, and then false is similar to none. So there is a reason. The true and false, they say they are currently retained for backward compatibility. And so they recommend us using all and none. And they say in the future versions, the true and false will no longer be used. It will be obsolete. So it is recommended that we use all and none instead of true and false. Okay, so still breaking on record changes, there is you can put a break on record changes, maybe when you're writing a record or before the record is written. You can set a debug there. So in JSON configuration file, you can specify if the debugger breaks on record changes using this break on record write property. So if you set this break on record property to true, the debug is set to break on record changes. Then it breaks before creating, modifying, or deleting a record. In case maybe you're deleting, your function deletes, or it modifies anything, maybe you have modify. Before it modifies, there will be a break there when you're debugging. So that property is, I think, new to most of us. Break on record rate. However, the default value for a break on record rate is false. But if you want it, you have to go and set it to true. So meaning currently, since we might not be setting it, the debug isn't set to break on record changes. So it will just proceed and modify anything before notifying us in the field. It doesn't break. Okay. So this break on record rate also has some other, you call them properties. So when you go to set it in the .json or the configuration file, it has many values. It has true, false, none, all, exclude, temporary. So it is the other four are similar to the previous one, except the last one. The other one was exclude try. This one is exclude temporary. So true breaks on all record writes. False breaks doesn't break on any record write. Just proceeds. And I said that is the default. Then none doesn't break on any record writes, similar to false. All breaks on all record writes, so similar to true. Just as we had the previous one, these true, false, none, all. The true, false are used for backward compatibility, and so Microsoft recommends that we use none and all if we are to set, because these true and false in future versions will become obsolete, never be used. Exclude temporary, however, breaks on record writes only if they are on a temporary table. Only for temporary tables. So exclude temporary, that's where that's it only breaks when there is a temporary table that is set in your code. Yeah.
Can you come again on exclude temporary?
Okay, exclude temporary. The previous one, the previous attributes, the true, the none, and all, for them they break. Oh, no, all is all which breaks. All breaks on all record writes, whether it is a temporary table or a normal table, which is not temporary. However, exclude temporary only breaks if there is a record or before the record write of the temporary table. Wait, breaks on record writes only if they aren't a temporary table. Oh, sorry, I've been has been the other way around. So it excludes the temporary. It breaks on record writes which are not temporary tables. Yeah, I think that's I had mixed it the other way around. So all breaks on all record tables or record writes for record writes including the temporary tables. However, exclude temporary, it stops or it breaks on record writes that are not temporary tables. So it excludes the temporary tables. Okay. Yeah, I think that's clear, Mark. Thank you. Then the other, we have this feature, the resource exposure policy settings. Now, previously, we had the show my code as we saw it there and the beginning slides. Show my when you set show my code to false, then your code cannot be downloaded, cannot be seen. You cannot even debug in your code. Now your extension, maybe you have extension A where you've set the show my code to false. So if there is a function there that you want maybe to step into, you cannot because you cannot because of this attribute that doesn't allow you to see someone's code, and also doesn't allow you to download the source code, the show my code, if it is false. However, in a version Business Central 2021 release with 2, I think that was 100. BC, yeah, BC 190, 190, or one of those. Yeah, so with that, the show my code was now replaced by this. It is still working. It is still available. Maybe in the future it will become obsolete, but currently it is still usable. However, it was replaced by this resource exposure policy settings, which offers a richer access control, because the other one was 1. Now this one has many properties for controlling the downloading of source code, then debugging someone's extension. It has something to do with that. So it has the following, the settings. These settings, if you go to the app.json, this one is set in app.json. And normally, currently, if you're starting a new maybe project, you go to go and then you start new project for the current, it comes by default. In the previous versions, it wasn't coming. You could just use the show my code, maybe 170 there. Wasn't coming the source exposure policy. But now, when you create a new project, it comes with these options: allow debugging, allow downloading source, include source in symbol file. Okay, so in the documentation, they said they are false by default. However, when I created, I saw they are true. So I actually wondered if it is the documentation is somehow not up to date, because I did for different versions and I tried running. Let me just, how can I just can yeah, so this one, when I created, I saw that it comes automatically. If I can just try. So, exclusion policy. For some reason.
In what are you saying? We can't hear you.
Some reason my computer was slow, but now it's back. Let me just try to create, and you see that the default in the documentation they told us false, but now I just want to create as we are seeing here. So let me do for maybe 160.
Can you share your entire screen, because you're still seeing the
Oh.
slides?
Sorry. Let me just share again. For some reason, my computer is think I need to use that. I've shared now the screen. Okay, so let me just. So I'll want to create a new project. And then there is 170, 160. Let me just do 160. Some restart. Let me just maybe please. Okay, so it has, when I check the app.json, you can see here that allow debugging is true, allow downloading source is true, include source. Even I want to lower version 200, and they are also giving me the same. So this is what is here. However, I checked even on other documentations other than Microsoft Learn, and they say the same, that is false. So I was confused. I was somehow confused. What is on ground is different from what is in documentation. So let us see what they do. A few here. So each of these properties defines a specific area in which the source code of an extension can be accessed. So for them, they say all options by default are set to false, which means that by default, no dependent extension can debug or download the source code of your extension, which is not the case that you've seen. And they also said that resource exposure policy setting isn't visible in app.json file, which is when it is generated. So I think that's why in June, I think they are going to change this paper. Currently, we are doing the previous version. In June this year, they are going to be changing the paper. Maybe because of changes, I don't know. Because I saw some contradictions, not only in the Microsoft Learn, but also the other main documentation, even GitHub. Yeah, I saw same thing, but it's not the case. So they say if you want to change the default value from false, you must add the setting manually, actually. So what do they do? Allow debugging in the extension where you want to, maybe I have extension A and B. In extension, you want to debug B. In B, in the resource exposure policy, the allow debugging must be set to true. And then if you want to download symbols for the given extension, you need to have this one. It's called allow downloadings. Include source in symbol file. Include source in symbol file, set to true. Then if you want to allow downloading the source, this is done from the extension management. So if you go to extension management, and you can download the source. However, also here, I went to the source I set the allow downloading source to false. Then I logged in the system, and I was able to download. So it really perturbed me. I was perturbed, and I don't know. I really like it. Was very confused. So here you see this download source. Initially, set allow downloading source to. Okay. Okay, John. John, you have your hand up.
Morning, Kim.
Morning.
There is a condition.
Yes.
When you deploy your extension through Visual Studio, you deploy it as a dev extension.
Yeah.
And normally in that case, the resource exposure policy settings does not apply if you deploy it as a dev extension. But if you package and deploy it as a package, that's when that policy will take effect. I don't know if I'm clear.
Okay.
When you look at your
right.
extension, those are all deployed as dev. They are still in development phase. So you can always download even if the policy is set. But if you deploy it as a package, then that one will take effect. All those settings. I pasted something in the chat before, but probably you didn't see it.
Oh, I didn't see.
If you look at some extensions that have been technically upgraded, you'll notice you will not be able to see the logic even if you debug. Even if you say go to definition, because of how those technical upgrades are done, that's when that resource exposure is set by default to false.
Okay.
Notice that in that case, if look at Mora, look at error, even if you say go to definition, you don't see the logic.
Okay.
Next when you have the best extension where that is.
Yeah.
So when you're deploying, there are two. In case you deploy as an app, all those policies will take effect. In case you don't deploy, if you just deploy through Visual Studio, it is taken as if you are still in development. And those resources, those policies won't. But if you package and deploy,
even in the our production, if we use the Visual Studio VS Code,
yes,
it remains in dev.
yeah,
So meaning they can. Oh,
it should be published as an application, as a global app, the way you see those ones of the standard.
okay. Like this one. So I think now I understand. Yeah. And actually it was also here. So I think I just didn't understand it somehow. Because they said causes where code can be debugged despite, but they just said debugged. So they didn't include the other downloading the source. So I think they had to add it, allow debugging into it, and also downloading its source. These are the conditions. One, if an extension is deployed through Visual Studio as a dev extension. Then two, custom external tools for AL might get access to the DAL information exposed by the debugger by listening to debugger events triggered by Visual Studio code. External tools. So we didn't also get some of these external tools. John, could you be knowing the external tools for AL that might get access to the DL information exposed by debugger? So there is a need using the events triggered by VS Code. So
You see, in VS Code, there are some other add-ons. If you go into the marketplace of that, there are other elements you can add. You can add a designer, you can add other custom tools. Even when you go to the App Store, there are even some cases, the app you download from the App Store, you can view its code. But there are tools, there are some apps you download and they request you to set a range of IDs that you are going to proceed with. In that way, you actually get to know the source code. But the person who could have published it could have just allowed it. Even in VS Code, you notice for us, you only have the R extension. But there could be other extensions to be added on top of that. There are many that people have developed outside. For us, you only normally go and put the R language, but there are others you can install. Like an object designer, you can add it there. So I think that's what they're referring to.
okay. The tab because of time. I think the last one. Today.
Ken, I think for today we can stop. Yeah.
Okay.
I see we've used